The dress was not made for her, and everyone in the room knew it. Clara Whitmore stood in the center of her sister's bedroom, while the wedding gown slipped from one pale shoulder like a secret trying to expose itself. The ivory silk had been measured for Vanessa, the golden daughter, the family's hope, the one who had been taught to smile at noble tables and lower her lashes just enough to make powerful men feel chosen. Clara had never been taught any of that. She had been taught where the winter blankets were stored, which servants needed extra candles during snowstorms, how to stretch flour through a hard month, and how to leave a room before anyone remembered she was still inside it. Now, 30 minutes before sunrise, her mother pulled the gown tighter at Clara's back and fastened the pearl buttons with hands that did not tremble. "Stand still," Mrs. Whitmore said. "The carriage is waiting." Clara looked at herself in the tall mirror. 22 years old. White skin made paler by fear, light brown hair pinned beneath a bridal veil that felt borrowed from another life. Gray-blue eyes too honest to belong in a family that survived by hiding inconvenient truths. The bodice sat wrong. The sleeves fell too long. The hem brushed the floor in uneven waves. She looked less like a bride than a girl dressed as someone her family loved better. Outside the bedroom door, hurried footsteps crossed the hall. No music. No blessing. No sister laughing through nervous tears. Vanessa had vanished before dawn, leaving only a crumpled veil, an unsigned prayer ribbon, and the treaty that still demanded a Whitmore daughter. The alliance with Stoneheart could not wait. The Northern Pax could not be insulted. The giant Alpha King could not be denied. So they had remembered Clara. Her father stood near the fireplace, dressed in formal black, his face tight with the irritation of a man inconvenienced by his least favorite child. "You have always been quiet," he said. "You can endure what your sister cannot." Clara felt the words settle in her chest, heavy and familiar. They did not call her brave. They did not call her kind. They called her capable of suffering, as if that made suffering her duty. "Does he know?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but it did not break. "Does King Gabriel know I am not the bride named in the treaty?" Her mother's fingers paused for half a second before she reached for the veil. "He will know when it is too late to refuse without dishonoring himself." Clara turned from the mirror. "So I am not being married. I am being delivered." Her father's jaw hardened. "You are saving this family." Clara almost laughed, but there was no humor left in her. This family had forgotten her birthday 3 years in a row. This family had seated her at the far end of every dinner table. This family had sent Vanessa silk gloves and Clara ledger books. But beyond their estate were families who had done nothing wrong, children who slept under Whitmore protection, older wolves who would not survive another border conflict. Clara thought of them, not of the parents who had finally found a use for her. Her mother lowered the veil over her face. "Do not cry," she whispered, cold as morning glass. "The giant Alpha King hates weakness." Clara looked through the thin white fabric at the people who had chosen her because she was easy to lose. Her hands were cold beneath the loose sleeves, but her spine straightened. "Then he will have to learn the difference between weakness and silence," she said. No one answered. No one apologized. Downstairs, the carriage wheels waited on frozen gravel, ready to carry the forgotten sister north toward Stoneheart Keep, toward a king nearly 7 feet tall, toward a marriage built on a lie, and toward the first room in her life where telling the truth might matter more than being obedient. The carriage left before the sun fully cleared the pine trees, its black wooden wheels crunching over frozen gravel, while Whitmore Manor faded behind a veil of pale morning fog. Clara sat alone inside, wrapped in a white bridal cloak that smelled faintly of lavender and someone else's future. The gown still pulled strangely at her shoulders. Every time the carriage turned, the loose bodice shifted, reminding her that even the dress knew she was not the intended bride. She kept her hands folded in her lap, fingers hidden beneath sleeves too long for her wrists, and watched the world pass through the frost-laced window. The road north cut through miles of silent forest, past snow-covered fences, sleeping farms and small pack villages where smoke rose from chimneys in soft gray threads. Somewhere beyond those roofs, families were waking to ordinary worries. Bread, firewood, restless children, winter sickness, unpaid taxes. They did not know a forgotten daughter was being carried toward a king in their name. Perhaps that was why Clara stayed in the carriage when every part of her wanted to open the door and run. She was not saving the parents who had spent years overlooking her. She was saving the people who would never know her name. Across from her sat the Whitmore steward, Mr. Callan, stiff-backed and silent, holding the treaty case on his knees as if it contained a holy relic instead of a lie. He had served her father for 20 years and had never once spoken to Clara unless a task required it. Now he avoided her eyes completely. "How far to Stoneheart Keep?" Clara asked. He cleared his throat. "Nearly 90 miles by the northern road, miss. We should arrive before dusk if the weather holds." Mississippi. Not bride. Not Lady Clara. Not Luna-to-be. Even now, language made space for doubt. Clara looked back to the window. "And if King Gabriel refuses?" Mr. Callan's gloved hands tightened around the treaty case. "Then your father will explain the circumstances." "No," Clara said softly. "My father will explain whatever protects him." The steward had no answer. Outside, the forest thickened. The trees grew taller, older, their branches heavy with snow, their trunks dark against the white ground. By noon, the northern road began to climb, winding between ridges where the air felt sharper and the sky seemed closer. Clara had heard stories of Gabriel Stoneheart since childhood. The Mountain King. The giant Alpha. A ruler so tall he had to duck beneath ordinary doorways. A man whose voice could quiet a council before he finished a sentence. They said his fortress had been carved into the side of a mountain because no palace built by softer hands could hold him. They said no Luna had ever remained at his side. Some stories made him sound cruel. Others made him sound cursed. Clara had learned long ago that people often called someone monstrous when they were too afraid to understand them. Still, fear lived under her ribs, steady and cold. She was an Omega, white-skinned, quiet-voiced, and unwanted even by the family sending her away. He was an Alpha King nearly 7 feet tall, powerful enough to hold the Northern Alliance together by will alone. The difference between them felt wider than the snowy valleys below the road. Late in the afternoon, Stoneheart Keep appeared. At first Clara mistook it for part of the mountain, a dark shape rising from the cliffside, all stone walls, towering gates, and banners snapping in the wind. The fortress was not beautiful in the delicate way Whitmore Manor tried to be. It was vast, severe, and ancient, built to endure storms rather than impress guests. As the carriage passed through the outer gate, guards in gray cloaks bowed without smiling. Their eyes moved to the bridal veil, then to the 2 large sleeves, then away. Clara felt seen and not seen all at once. The carriage stopped at the base of wide stone steps dusted with snow. No musicians waited. No family stood behind her. Only the open doors of the keep and the deep warmth of torchlight beyond. Mr. Callan stepped down first, then offered his hand because protocol required it. Clara accepted, gathering the loose skirt so she would not stumble. The wind lifted her veil, and for one brief second, the cold touched her face like a question. She looked up at the fortress that was supposed to become her prison, her punishment or her fate. Then she straightened her shoulders and climbed the steps. Inside, the entrance hall stretched higher than any room she had ever seen. Stone pillars rose like tree trunks. Iron chandeliers burned overhead. Every doorway seemed built for someone larger than ordinary men. Her footsteps sounded small against the floor, but they did not falter. At the far end of the hall, beneath the carved crest of a silver wolf and mountain crown, the court of Stoneheart waited. And in the center of it all stood King Gabriel Stoneheart, taller than every man around him, dressed in dark formal robes lined with gray fur, black hair falling neatly to his collar, ice-blue eyes fixed not on the treaty case, not on the steward, but on Clara's face beneath the veil. The hall held its breath. Clara stopped 10 feet away from him, close enough to see that the stories had been wrong about one thing. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a man who had spent years being mistaken for one. The silence after Clara stopped before Gabriel Stoneheart felt larger than the hall itself. Every courtier watched her from beneath banners of the silver wolf and mountain crown, waiting for the giant Alpha King to speak first, waiting for the moment when the lie would either be ignored for politics or exposed for honor. Clara could feel the wedding veil brushing her cheeks, thin enough to see through, thick enough to make her feel like a ghost at someone else's ceremony. Gabriel stood 10 feet away, nearly 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered beneath dark formal robes lined with gray fur. His white skin warmed by torchlight, his black hair neat at his collar, his ice-blue eyes steady on her face. He did not look angry. That frightened her more than anger would have. Anger was familiar. Anger told you where the wound was. This quiet made room for truth. Mr. Callan stepped forward with the treaty case clutched in both hands. Your Majesty, on behalf of Lord Whitmore, I present the bride promised under the Northern Peace Accord. Gabriel did not take the case. His eyes moved once from Clara's face to the gown hanging too loose at her shoulders, then to the sleeves covering half her hands, then back to her. The court noticed. A whisper passed along the stone walls like wind moving under a door. Remove the veil, Gabriel said. His voice was deep, not cruel, but it carried so easily that no one needed him to repeat it. Clara lifted her hands. For a moment, the fabric caught on the pin above her ear, and the tiny struggle burned hotter than humiliation should have. She freed it gently and let the veil fall back. The hall saw her clearly then. Not Vanessa Whitmore with her golden hair and practiced smile, but Clara, pale and quiet, light brown hair pinned simply, gray-blue eyes tired from a morning that had taken too much and asked her to call it duty. Gabriel looked at Mr. Callan. This is not Vanessa Whitmore. The steward's face drained of color. Your Majesty, circumstances changed with great urgency. That is not an answer. The words were calm, but the floor seemed to settle beneath them. One of Gabriel's advisors, a severe woman in a slate-gray gown, stepped closer. My king, if the Whitmore family has substituted the bride named in the treaty without consent from this court, it may be considered a breach. Clara felt the word breach move through the room like a blade made of law, though no one raised a hand. She thought of the villages along the road, the smoking chimneys, the people who would pay for noble pride if the accord collapsed. Her fear tightened, then became something straighter. It was not this court they deceived first, she said. All eyes returned to her. Mr. Callan made a small sound of warning, but Clara did not look at him. She looked at Gabriel because he was the only one in the room who had bothered to see the dress did not fit. They deceived me first. The advisor's expression changed. Gabriel remained still. Explain. Clara's fingers curled inside the long sleeves. Vanessa left before dawn. My family could not send an empty carriage, so they sent me. I was dressed in her gown 30 minutes before sunrise. I was not asked. I was told. Mr. Callan whispered her name, full of panic now, as if truth were more dangerous than betrayal. Clara ignored him. If the treaty must fail, let the record show why. I did not come here pretending to be wanted. I came because I was the one they could afford to lose. The hall fell into a silence so complete that the torches seemed loud. Gabriel's eyes changed first, not soft exactly, but struck by something he recognized. Perhaps not the details. Perhaps only the shape of being used by people who smiled and called it duty. The severe advisor looked from Clara to the king. Your Majesty, we should suspend the ceremony until the council determines whether this substitution invalidates the accord. A younger nobleman muttered, Send her back. Another voice added, Whitmore has insulted Stoneheart. Clara stood very still, feeling each word land, but none of them cut as deeply as her father's voice had that morning. Gabriel raised one hand, and the room quieted without fear, as if obedience had become habit around him. Then he did something Clara did not expect. He descended the 3 shallow steps from the dais, slowly enough that she did not feel approached like prey, and stopped several feet before her. Even there he towered over her, his shadow falling across the hem of the borrowed dress. He looked down at the loose pearl buttons, the uneven sleeves, the face she had spent a lifetime lowering out of view. Did they tell you I hate weakness? He asked. Clara's breath caught. Her mother's words returned like cold fingers at her throat. Yes. Gabriel's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Then they know nothing about me. For the first time since dawn, Clara felt something inside her loosen. Not hope, not trust yet, but the smallest pause between fear and what came next. Gabriel turned to his court. The ceremony is suspended, not ended. The truth will be witnessed properly. Then he looked back at Clara, and his voice lowered, meant for her but heard by all. No one in Stoneheart Keep will call you a substitute again until I know whether you came here as a lie, or as the only honest person in this hall. The court did not release Clara from its attention, even after Gabriel suspended the ceremony. If anything, the pause made the scrutiny sharper. She stood beneath the silver wolf banner while advisors gathered in low voices near the dais, their slate and black garments forming a wall of judgment. Mr. Callan remained by the entrance with the treaty case in his hands, pale and silent now, as if the papers had become too heavy to carry. Clara kept her shoulders straight, though the borrowed gown still slipped at one side and the too long sleeves hid half her fingers. She had told the truth. That should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and waiting to learn whether the ground would hold. Gabriel spoke quietly with the severe advisor, whose name Clara heard someone whisper as Lady Maren Vale, the Stoneheart High Counselor. Maren did not look cruel. She looked careful, and careful people could be more frightening than angry ones because they knew exactly which words could change a life. "The accord names Vanessa Whitmore," Maren said, her voice clear enough to carry. "If this bride is accepted without proof, other houses may treat future treaties as flexible suggestions." A gray-haired elder near the hearth nodded. "If she is rejected, the northern border may read it as an insult. Whitmore will blame Stoneheart for breaking peace." Clara listened to them discuss her as if she were a misplaced seal on a legal page. Gabriel listened too, but his eyes returned to her more than once, not with pity, not with possession, but with a question he had not yet asked aloud. Finally, he turned to the elder. "Bring the oath stone." A visible ripple moved through the room. Lady Maren's brows lifted. "Your Majesty, the oath stone has not been used in a marriage dispute for nearly a generation." "Then it has waited long enough." Servants moved at once, not with fear, but with the practiced urgency of a household that knew its king expected order without cruelty. Clara noticed that. No one flinched when Gabriel spoke. No one scrambled as if one mistake would ruin them. A pair of attendants opened a carved side door and wheeled in a waist-high pedestal draped in dark blue cloth. Atop it rested a smooth oval stone, black as winter midnight, marked with veins of silver that seemed to glow faintly under the torchlight. The air changed around it, becoming cool and still. Mr. Callan made a strained sound. "Your Majesty, surely that is unnecessary. Lord Whitmore can provide clarification by letter." Gabriel did not look at him. "Lord Whitmore has provided enough confusion for one day." Clara almost lowered her eyes to hide the sudden warmth in her chest. It was not pleasure. Not exactly. It was the unfamiliar feeling of someone powerful refusing to let her family's explanation become the only one that mattered. Lady Maren stepped toward Clara. "The oath stone does not punish. It reveals the nature of a vow. If the treaty rejects your presence, the stone will darken, and the marriage cannot proceed under ancient law. If it accepts you, the council must recognize you as the rightful bride in the eyes of the accord." Clara looked at the stone. "And if I do not want it to accept me?" The question escaped before she could decide whether she was allowed to ask it. Several courtiers shifted uncomfortably, but Gabriel's attention sharpened. Lady Maren paused. "Then that must be spoken before the test." Clara felt every eye on her again. The old Clara would have swallowed the question and called it foolish. But the old Clara had been sent away in a gown that did not fit, and perhaps she had finally left something behind on the road north. Gabriel descended another step, stopping far enough away that his height did not crowd her. "No treaty is worth a life lived without a voice," he said. The hall went still, not because his tone was harsh, but because a king had just said something that made law smaller than choice. Clara searched his face. His ice-blue eyes were steady. His jaw was strong, his presence enormous, his reputation carved from fear, and yet he had given her more room in 10 minutes than her family had given her in 22 years. "I do not know what I want," she admitted. "I only know I do not want another lie spoken over me." Gabriel nodded once, as if that answer deserved the same respect as certainty. "Then let the stone hear that." Lady Maren gestured gently. "Place your hand upon it and speak only what is true." Clara stepped forward. The marble beneath her shoes felt cold even through the thin soles. Her hand emerged from the long sleeve, pale and small against the dark stone. She expected it to feel like ice. Instead, it felt warm, as if the stone had been waiting for a pulse. She closed her eyes for one breath, then opened them and spoke to the room that had expected her to apologize for existing. "My name is Clara Whitmore. I am not the daughter named in the treaty. I was not asked to come here. I came because refusing would place innocent people beneath the weight of my family's pride. I do not know whether I can be a queen. I do not know whether I can trust a king. But I will not pretend I chose a road that was chosen for me. The silver veins inside the stone flickered. A whisper spread through the court. Clara tried to pull her hand away, but the warmth rose gently, not holding her, only answering her. Across from her, Gabriel watched with an expression that had lost all distance. The silver light grew brighter, spilling across her sleeve, the loose bodice, the uneven hem, transforming the borrowed gown into something almost honest. Then words appeared within the stone, old letters shining like moonlight under water. Lady Marin read them aloud, her voice no longer careful but awed. The peace is not held by the promised name, but by the willing heart. Clara forgot to breathe. Mr. Callan dropped the treaty case. The sound echoed through Stoneheart Keep, small and final. Gabriel looked at the glowing stone, then at Clara, and for the first time, the giant Alpha King seemed less like a mountain and more like a man who had just found a door where everyone else saw a wall. The glowing words remained inside the oath stone long after Lady Marin finished reading them, silver letters beneath black glass, bright enough to turn every face in the hall pale with wonder. Clara kept her hand on the stone because she was afraid that if she moved, the truth might vanish and the room would return to what it had been. A place where important people decided what her life was worth. But the words did not fade. The peace is not held by the promised name, but by the willing heart. A willing heart. Clara almost wanted to laugh at the strangeness of it. No one had cared about her willingness when they pulled Vanessa's gown over her shoulders. No one had asked her heart anything when they pushed her into the carriage. Yet this ancient stone, older than the families arguing beneath its light, had listened more carefully than her own blood ever had. Mr. Callan bent to retrieve the treaty case, his hands shaking so badly the brass latches clicked against the marble. This must be interpreted cautiously, he said. Lord Whitmore will insist the original wording still names Vanessa. Gabriel turned his head, and the steward fell silent. The king did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Lord Whitmore is not here. Clara felt the sentence pass through her like a door closing behind the old life. Lady Marin stepped closer to the oath stone, her severe expression softened by reluctant awe. The old law is clear. If the oath stone accepts a substitute by willing heart, the accord remains valid, but only if the bride gives free consent before the final vow. The court stirred. Free consent. The words sounded almost foreign in a room built by alliances and bloodlines. Gabriel looked at Clara, not at the glowing stone, not at the advisors, not at the fallen treaty case. Then the final vow will wait. Clara blinked. Wait. Until you know what you want. The answer was so simple that for a moment she did not understand it. She had expected relief from one kind of pressure to become another kind of pressure. She had expected the stone's acceptance to become a chain dressed in moonlight. Instead, Gabriel stepped back, giving her space in front of his entire court. Stoneheart Keep has guest chambers, he said. You will have one under your own name. Not Vanessa's. Not the treaties. Yours. You will be treated with honor while you decide. Something in Clara's chest tightened painfully. Honor had always been a word given to families, houses, men with seals, women who behaved as expected. She had never heard it placed gently beside her own name. Mr. Callan found his courage again. Your Majesty, Lord Whitmore sent Miss Clara as the bride. She is expected to fulfill the accord. Gabriel's eyes cooled. Lord Whitmore sent a daughter without asking whether she wished to be sent. That expectation will not rule my house. The hall went still. Clara looked up at him, at this enormous king everyone had taught her to fear, and felt the first fragile thread of confusion become something warmer. Not trust yet. Trust was too large, too expensive. But perhaps the beginning of safety. Lady Marin gestured to two attendants. Prepare the East guest suite. Gabriel shook his head once. No. The smaller suite near the inner garden. It has a lower hearth and lighter doors. Clara did not know why that mattered until she remembered every doorway she had passed since entering Stoneheart Keep, built for men like Gabriel, not women like her. He had noticed. Again. He noticed the gown. The sleeves. The height of the rooms. The quiet ways a place could make someone feel too small. Her throat tightened, and she turned away before anyone could read too much in her face. A soft commotion came from the entrance. A courier had arrived, snow clinging to his gray cloak, a sealed message in his hand. He bowed deeply. "From Whitmore Manor, Your Majesty. Urgent." Mr. Callan's face changed in a way Clara did not like. Gabriel took the letter and broke the seal. His expression did not shift as he read, but the air around him seemed to grow heavier. "Vanessa Whitmore has been found," he said. Clara's fingers went cold. The courier kept his eyes down. "Lord and Lady Whitmore request that the ceremony be paused until they arrive with the intended bride. They claim Miss Clara traveled north out of loyalty, only to preserve appearances until her sister could be recovered." The room blurred for one heartbeat. Preserve appearances. Even now they were reaching across 90 miles of snow to make Clara smaller again. To turn her honesty into obedience. To make her a placeholder in her own life. Mr. Callan exhaled with visible relief. "That resolves the confusion." Clara pulled her hand from the oath stone. The silver letters flared once, then settled. "No," she said. The word was not loud, but it landed. Gabriel looked at her. So did every person in the hall. Clara's fear did not leave, but it no longer stood in front of her. "It explains the confusion," she said, voice steadying with each word. "It does not resolve what they did." Lady Marin watched her closely, and this time there was respect in her careful eyes. Gabriel folded the letter once and held it at his side. "Then we will hear them when they arrive." Clara drew a slow breath. "And will I be required to stand silent while they speak for me?" Gabriel's answer came immediately. "No one word. No hesitation. No condition." Clara looked at the giant king in the mountain hall, and understood why the stories had frightened people. Strength was frightening when you expected it to crush you. But Gabriel's strength had not moved against her. It had made room. The doors at the far end of the hall opened wider to let in the winter wind, and beyond them, the road from Whitmore stretched dark beneath the coming night. Clara knew her family was on that road, bringing the sister everyone wanted and the version of the story they needed the world to believe. This time, Clara would not disappear before they arrived. The waiting hours at Stoneheart Keep did not feel like waiting. They felt like a storm gathering behind closed doors. Clara was shown to the smaller suite near the inner garden, just as Gabriel had ordered, but she did not sleep. The room was warmer than the hall, with a low hearth, a narrow bed covered in blue wool blankets, and windows that looked out over snow-covered pines. Someone had placed a robe over the chair, soft gray and properly sized, yet Clara remained in the borrowed wedding gown because changing felt too much like admitting the day had ended. It had not. Not while her family was still on the road. Not while Vanessa was being brought north with the name everyone had expected to hear. Not while the Oathstone's words still burned behind Clara's eyes. The peace is not held by the promised name, but by the willing heart. Near midnight a soft knock came. Clara opened the door to find Lady Marin Vale standing outside with a folded shawl and a cup of warm cider. "The Whitmore party has crossed the outer bridge," Marin said. "They will reach the hall within minutes." Clara accepted the shawl, her hands colder than she wanted them to be. "Do I look afraid?" Marin studied her with careful honesty. "Yes." Clara let out a small breath. "Good. I would hate to start lying now." For the first time Marin almost smiled. They returned to the great hall together. The Oathstone still rested on its pedestal beneath the silver wolf banner, its veins dim but awake. Gabriel stood beside it, no crown on his head, dark robes falling heavily from his broad shoulders, black hair brushed back, ice blue eyes quiet in the torchlight. He looked even taller in the empty hall, almost unreal, but when Clara entered, his gaze softened enough to remind her he was not the mountain people called him. He was the man who had asked whether she wanted a voice. "You do not have to stand alone," he said. Clara looked at the open space beside him. A day ago, standing near an Alpha King would have felt like stepping too close to thunder. Now it felt like standing near a wall that would not move unless she asked it to. "Then I will stand there," she said. The doors opened before either of them could say more. Lord and Lady Whitmore entered first, wrapped in traveling cloaks and wounded dignity. Vanessa followed between them, golden-haired, white-skinned, beautiful even with tear-bright eyes and a face arranged for sympathy. She wore a blue velvet cloak over a proper gown, and when she saw Clara still dressed in the ill-fitting wedding silk, guilt flashed across her face so quickly it might have been mistaken for fear. Lord Whitmore bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, I offer my sincerest apologies for this unfortunate misunderstanding." Clara felt the old pull to become quiet. It rose in her like a habit, automatic and heavy. Gabriel did not look at Lord Whitmore. He looked at Clara. The choice was hers. She stepped forward. It was not a misunderstanding. Her mother's eyes sharpened. "Clara, not now." The words were familiar enough to bruise. Not now had followed Clara her whole life. Not now when she asked why Vanessa received lessons and she did not. Not now when she wanted to speak at dinner. Not now when she tried to say she was lonely in a house full of people. She looked at her mother and answered softly, "Yes, now." The hall seemed to draw closer around that single word. Vanessa lowered her gaze. Lord Whitmore tried to recover with a strained smile. "My daughter is overwhelmed." She traveled under great pressure to preserve the accord until Vanessa could be safely returned. Her loyalty is admirable, but unnecessary now. Clara turned to the oath stone. Its silver veins flickered faintly as if listening. "I did not travel to preserve appearances. I was sent because Vanessa ran, and because you believed I would not matter enough to protest." Vanessa whispered, "Clara, I was scared." Clara looked at her sister, and the anger she expected did not come cleanly. There was pain, yes, and exhaustion, but also the memory of two girls in the same house taught different kinds of fear. Vanessa had been raised to be admired, then offered to a king she had been taught to dread. Clara had been raised to disappear, then used because disappearing was convenient. "I know you were scared," Clara said, "but my fear was not smaller because no one cared to see it." Vanessa's eyes filled. Lady Whitmore stepped toward Clara, voice low and tight. "You will not shame this family before the Stoneheart court." Clara's hand shook beneath the shawl. Gabriel shifted slightly beside her, but he did not speak over her. That restraint gave her courage. This family shamed itself when it confused silence with consent. The oath stone brightened. The silver glow touched the hem of Clara's borrowed gown, the same gown that had made her look like a mistake hours ago. Now it looked like evidence. Lady Marin stepped forward, addressing the hall. "The oath stone has already accepted Clara Whitmore as the bearer of the willing heart. Under old law, the accord may continue only if she freely consents to the final vow." Lord Whitmore stared at Clara as if seeing a door he had always walked past suddenly locked from the other side. "Clara, think carefully. Your pact depends on this." Gabriel's voice entered the room then, calm and immovable. "Her pack will not be held over her like a chain." Clara looked up at him, and for one heartbeat, the whole hall softened around the edges. Then Gabriel did what no one expected. Slowly, deliberately, the giant Alpha King lowered himself to one knee before her, not as a proposal, not as a command, but to bring his eyes level with hers. Gasps moved through the court. Clara forgot how to breathe. At nearly 7 feet tall, Gabriel had spent his life making others look up. Now he chose to look straight at her. "Clara Whitmore," he said, his deep voice carrying to every corner of Stoneheart Keep, "do you want this marriage? Not the treaty. Not why." Clara could feel every person in Stoneheart Keep waiting for her answer. But for once, the silence did not belong to them. It belonged to her. Gabriel remained on one knee before her. His nearly 7-foot frame lowered in a way that made the entire court seem to rethink the meaning of strength. His ice-blue eyes did not push, did not plead, did not demand gratitude for his gentleness. He simply waited, broad shoulders still beneath dark robes lined with gray fur, black hair falling neatly near his collar, his face solemn under the torchlight. Clara looked at him and saw all the stories people had built around his size, his power, his name. Then she saw what stood beneath them. A king who could have used the oath stone to claim her, but instead used his authority to give her a choice. Across the hall, her father shifted impatiently. "Clara," he said, warning hidden under softness, "remember what is at stake." She turned toward him slowly. All her life, he had spoken to her as if duty were a room she had been born inside and should never attempt to leave. But Gabriel's question had opened a window. "I do remember," she said. "I remember the border villages. I remember the families who need peace. I remember the servants who packed food for this journey while my own family avoided my eyes. I remember all of it. Her mother's expression tightened with something close to fear. Vanessa stood behind her, tears glistening on her cheeks, no longer the golden daughter tonight, only a frightened young woman watching the sister she had stepped over become visible. Clara's voice trembled, but it did not fail. But I also remember that no one asked me whether I was willing to carry it. The oath stone glowed brighter on its pedestal, silver light threading through the black surface like moonlight under ice. Lady Marin watched with both hands folded, her careful face softened by recognition. Gabriel did not move. Clara looked back at him. If I say no, what happens to my pack? Gabriel answered in front of everyone. Stoneheart will not punish innocent people for the decisions of their leaders. The accord will be renegotiated under council witness. Your family will lose its authority to speak alone for the border houses until the matter is settled. A stunned murmur moved through the Whitmore party. Lord Whitmore's face went gray with disbelief. Clara swallowed. And if I say yes? Then the final vow will be yours, not theirs, Gabriel said. And if you later find that this keep feels like a cage, the council will record your right to return to your own life with honor. I will not build peace from your silence. The word struck her so deeply that she almost looked away. No one had ever offered Clara a future with a door in it. Families like hers made duty sound holy because it locked from the outside. Gabriel had just placed the key in her hand. For a long moment Clara thought of running. She imagined leaving the gown on the marble floor, changing into the gray robe in the guest chamber, riding south not as a rejected bride but as a woman who had finally refused to be used. The thought did not shame her. That alone felt like a miracle. Then she thought of the Oathstone's words of the willing heart. Not a fearless heart. Not a heart untouched by pain. A willing one. She looked at Gabriel, still kneeling, still waiting. I will not marry you because they sent me, she said. Gabriel's expression remained steady, but something in his eyes braced itself. Clara took a breath. I will not marry you because a treaty needs a name. I will not marry you because my sister ran, or because my father is afraid of losing power, or because I have been trained to endure what others refuse. The hall held its breath. Clara stepped closer, close enough that the loose hem of Vanessa's gown brushed the stone near Gabriel's knee. I will marry you only if this marriage begins with the truth, and only if every daughter in this alliance is given what I was denied. Gabriel's eyes lifted fully to hers. Name it. Clara turned so the whole court could hear. No political marriage in the Northern Alliance can be sealed without the public consent of the person being given. Not a father's consent. Not a pack leader's signature. There. Spoken clearly before witnesses. If that cannot be law, then my answer is no. Lady Marin drew in a slow breath. The oathstone flared, silver light sweeping across the hall in a quiet wave. Gabriel rose to his full height, and for the first time, Clara did not feel diminished by it. He did not tower over her to command. He stood tall enough to shelter the law she had just spoken. Then it will be law, he said. Lord Whitmore stepped forward. Your Majesty, you cannot alter alliance tradition for one Omega girl. Gabriel's gaze moved to him, calm as a mountain under snow. I am not altering it for one Omega girl. I am correcting it because one Omega girl had the courage to say what every court pretended not to hear. Clara felt the room change around her. Not quickly. Not completely. But enough. Vanessa began to cry silently, and this time Clara did not feel responsible for comforting her. Her mother looked away. Her father had no words left that did not expose him further. Gabriel turned back to Clara and extended his hand, palm open, waiting. Not taking. Offering. Clara looked at that hand, large and scarred by duty, then placed her smaller hand in his. The oathstone answered with a steady silver glow, not binding her like a chain, but witnessing her like a promise. And as the court bowed, Clara understood that she had not been rescued from being forgotten. She had remembered herself loudly enough that even a king had listened. The final vow did not happen quickly. Gabriel would not allow it to be rushed into the same shape as the old law, and Clara understood then that patience could be another kind of protection. Before dawn, Lady Marin ordered the council scribes to bring the alliance records, the treaty ledgers, and the old marriage statutes into the great hall. Long tables were placed beneath the silver wolf banner, candles were lit in iron stands, and every witness remained. Stoneheart advisors, border elders, Whitmore representatives, household servants, and Vanessa, who stood near the hearth with her blue cloak gathered tightly around her shoulders. Clara had changed at last. The borrowed wedding gown lay folded over a chair in the side chamber, no longer pretending to belong to her. In its place, she wore the soft gray robe Gabriel had ordered placed in her room, simple, warm, and properly fitted. It was not a queen's gown. It was not a servant's dress. It felt like a pause between the life she had been given and the life she might choose. When she returned to the hall, her father looked displeased, as if removing Vanessa's gown had removed his last claim over the story. Gabriel noticed too, but his expression held quiet approval. He stood near the oath stone, tall and solemn in his dark robes, not seated on the throne, not above the others, but among them while the new law was written. Lady Marin read the words aloud as the scribes recorded them. No daughter, son, Omega, Beta, or Alpha within the Northern Alliance could be promised in marriage by another person, unless they spoke clear consent before witnesses, free from threat, debt, or family pressure. If consent was withheld, the treaty must be renegotiated without punishment against the unwilling person. The hall listened in uneasy silence. Some nobles shifted at the word Omega, as if equality had entered the room without invitation. Clara heard them and stood straighter. Gabriel did not miss it. Add another line, he said. The scribe looked up. Your Majesty? Gabriel's ice-blue eyes moved across the hall, stopping briefly on Lord Whitmore. Any house found substituting one family member for another without consent loses the right to negotiate alliance marriages for one full season. Lord Whitmore's face tightened. Lady Whitmore gripped her gloves. Vanessa lowered her head, not in triumph, not in shame exactly, but in the first honest understanding that Clara could no longer be placed between her and consequence. Lady Marin nodded. It will be added. Only then did Gabriel turn to Clara. Is the law enough for your condition? Clara looked at the pages, at the ink still shining wet beneath candlelight. Her heart beat hard. This was more than she had imagined asking for. Yet something inside her, newly awake and no longer willing to shrink, knew that enough was not only a matter of words. It is a beginning, she said. A murmur passed through the hall, but Gabriel's mouth softened at the edge, almost a smile. Then we begin there. The oath stone brightened once, accepting the amendment as if the old magic had waited years to hear human law catch up with mercy. Lady Marin stepped forward with the final vow ribbon, silver woven through white silk. Clara Whitmore, she said, formal now but no longer distant. Do you stand here by your own voice and your own will? Clara looked first at Vanessa. Her sister's eyes were wet, but she did not ask Clara to save her from the discomfort of regret. Then Clara looked at her parents. For years she had wanted them to see her. Now they did, and it felt less like victory than release. Finally she looked at Gabriel. The giant Alpha King did not look certain of her answer, and that uncertainty was the most respectful thing in the room. I do, Clara said. The words were quiet, but no one mistook them for weakness. Lady Marin turned to Gabriel. Gabriel Stoneheart, do you stand here by your own voice and your own will? Gabriel looked at Clara, not the court, not the law, not the crown carved above them. I do. The vow ribbon was placed across their joined hands. Gabriel's hand was enormous around hers, but he did not close it until Clara closed hers first. The oath stone flared silver, filling the hall with a soft light that touched every witness equally, noble and servant, Alpha and Omega, family and stranger. No chain formed. No command settled over her heart. Instead, Clara felt a warmth like a door opening from the inside. The peace had accepted them because the choice had finally been spoken. When the light faded, Lady Marin bowed. The accord stands. The marriage is witnessed. The new law is sealed. For a moment no one moved. Then one of the border elders bowed deeply, followed by another, then another. The gesture spread across the hall, not forced, not theatrical but solemn. Clara stood beside Gabriel, still in gray, still trembling, still herself. Vanessa stepped forward last. Lord Whitmore reached as if to stop her, but she moved beyond him. She stopped before Clara and lowered her head. I was wrong to run and leave you behind, she whispered. I was wrong to let them think your fear mattered less than mine. Clara's throat tightened. Forgiveness did not arrive fully formed. It would not be handed out like a ribbon because the night demanded a graceful ending. But Clara could give truth what truth deserved. You were afraid, she said. So was I. Vanessa looked up, tears slipping down her face. What happens to me now? Gabriel answered before Clara had to carry that too. You return to Whitmore Manor under counsel witness. You will not be offered in any alliance without your consent. Neither will your sister ever be used to protect your comfort again. Vanessa nodded, small and shaken. Clara watched her step back and felt something old loosen its hold. The forgotten sister had not become cruel to be remembered. She had simply stopped disappearing. Outside, dawn began to silver the mountain windows. Stoneheart Keep, which had seemed so enormous when Clara arrived, no longer felt built to swallow her. It felt ill. The first sunrise Clara saw as Luna of Stoneheart did not feel like a fairy tale. It felt like standing barefoot at the edge of a life too large to understand all at once. Dawn poured through the mountain windows in pale silver bands, touching the oath stone, the ink-dried law, the folded wedding gown that no longer belonged to anyone, and the gray robe Clara still wore like proof that she had entered the hall as herself. The court had begun to disperse, slow and quiet, carrying away a story none of them had expected to witness. Some looked at her with respect, some with uncertainty, a few with discomfort, because a girl they had first judged as a mistake had altered the law before breakfast. Clara did not need all of them to love her. That was another lesson the morning had given her. Being seen did not mean being approved by everyone. It meant no longer vanishing to make others comfortable. Gabriel stood beside the oath stone while Lady Marin sealed the final copies of the new decree. He looked enormous in the dawn light, nearly 7 feet of dark robes, broad shoulders, black hair and ice-blue eyes, yet the fear Clara had carried into Stoneheart Keep no longer recognized him as a threat. He turned when she approached, giving her his full attention as if the hall, the council, and the alliance could wait for a woman in a gray robe to decide where to stand. You should rest, he said. Clara looked toward the far doors where her parents waited under council escort, their authority diminished but their dignity preserved because Gabriel had refused to make justice look like humiliation. Vanessa stood near them, pale and quiet, holding her blue cloak around herself. Clara did not hate her. That surprised her most. Hurt remained deep and honest, but hatred did not. Perhaps being given a choice had made revenge feel smaller. I will rest when they leave, Clara said. Gabriel followed her gaze. Do you want to speak with them? Clara thought of all the years she had imagined the perfect words, the ones that would finally make her parents understand what neglect had done. But the need had faded in the same place where her silence had broken. No, she said softly. Not today. Gabriel nodded, accepting that without asking her to be kinder for the comfort of others. Lady Whitmore looked as if she expected Clara to come anyway, to smooth the ending, to make the family story easier to carry home. Clara stayed where she was. Lord Whitmore bowed stiffly from across the hall, no apology on his lips, but no command left in his posture. Vanessa met Clara's eyes only once, and in that look there was shame, gratitude, and the beginning of a question neither sister was ready to answer. Then the Whitmore party left through the great doors into the morning snow, and Clara felt no chain pull after them. Weeks passed and Stoneheart Keep changed more slowly than songs would later claim. Clara did not become fearless overnight. She still paused before entering crowded rooms. She still woke some mornings expecting to be told she was needed only because someone else had failed to appear. But each time, Gabriel gave her space to speak before he spoke for her. At council meetings, he sat beside her instead of above her. When elders argued that the consent law would weaken alliances, Clara answered that any peace built on a silenced heart was already weak. The first petition came from a border pack in less than a month, a young beta girl asking to refuse a match arranged to settle a land dispute. Clara heard her testimony in the same hall where her own voice had nearly shaken apart, and when the girl left under royal protection, Clara understood what the oath stone had truly started. Not a romance first. A door. By the first full moon of spring, the Northern Alliance had recorded 7 hearings, 3 renegotiated treaties, and 1 public apology from a house that had mistaken tradition for ownership. Gabriel kept every decree. Lady Marin built a council of witnesses from every rank. Vanessa wrote once, not asking forgiveness, only saying she had begun learning the names of the servants at Whitmore Manor. Clara read the letter twice, then placed it in a drawer. Some healing, she decided, did not need to be rushed into beauty to be real. On the night Stoneheart formally presented her as Luna, the great hall was filled with candlelight, pine garlands, and silver banners. This time her gown fit. It was soft ivory with silver embroidery at the sleeves, chosen by Clara herself, and beneath one cuff she wore a narrow gray ribbon from the robe she had worn when the law changed. Gabriel stood beside her in dark royal robes lined with gray fur, the Mountain King still towering over every person in the room. Yet when he took her hand, he waited for her fingers to close first. The court saw it. So did the servants. So did every daughter standing beside a father, every son standing beneath a family name, every Omega who had been taught that endurance was the same as consent. Clara looked up at Gabriel, and he lowered his head just enough that she never had to feel small to meet his eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked. Clara looked out at the hall that had once judged her, then beyond it to the mountains holding Stoneheart keep against the sky. She was still the forgotten sister in some parts of her heart, but she was also the woman who had refused to let forgetting become her fate. "Yes," she said. And when the court bowed, it was not to a bride delivered in place of another. It was to the Luna who had taught the Northern Pacts that true strength does not take a choice away. It protects the right to choose.